mental health awareness with Karine Rayson of the Crew Coach. How are you, Karine?
I'm very well. Thank you, Ria. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. It's something that I feel really passionate about as far as mental health, the environment. There's so many things that in today's day and age, we do need to start talking about, and we do need to bring to the forefront of people's attention. Now, I want to know a little bit about you because you are going to be doing your own segment on Yachting International Radio. And I wanted to introduce the viewers and the listeners to the person that is you, the Crew Coach. Mm-hmm. You started off, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from South Africa, and I immigrated to Australia, I believe, almost 14 years ago. Time flies, so it's hard to keep track. And a few years into living into Australia, I decided that I wanted to travel, and then found my way to the super yacht industry, and then did my training in South Africa, flew back to Australia with a broken back, and then managed to get to Ancona through a contact and get on board my first yacht.
So what led you to being the Crew Coach? I mean, you look after, you help people with their mental health, you help build teams, et cetera. What brought you to the realization that this was your calling and what you really wanted to do?
It's very interesting because it also actually ties into mental health for me specifically, and how I found my way back to yachting and taking over the Crew Coach. So the Crew Coach started in 2009 by Alison Rental, and then I took over January 2018. And I added more to the services because I recognized there needed to be a focus on leadership specifically, as well as mental health and counseling. So I've got training and experience in both, and that's why I decided to diversify the training. But to answer your question, how I got into it, I always knew at a very young age, I believe I was 9 years old, I had it in my head that I wanted to help others. And so it wasn't too difficult for me to decide on what I wanted to study at university. So I did a degree in psychology, organizational psychology, counseling, and business, and various other courses in between. So I must have spent over $200,000 on my intuition so far, because I really believe that knowledge is power, and I do want to make a difference by helping people develop their own skill set so they can manage whatever is going on in their lives. So after yachting, it was then for me confirmed that I wanted to get into the space of helping others. So I decided to study further. We had a lot of conflict on board, bullying, harassment, we had it all. And I was absolutely flabbergasted that the heads of departments weren't trained in leadership and dealing with people, as well as managing mental health issues. So I found myself in the middle of all the drama, and that was taxing in itself. I also found out that my father had cancer at the time, and he thought he was going to die. So I had to brush all that aside. And I know with the culture of yachting, it's your guests, it's the yacht first before your personal life. So if you want to go to a wedding, you can't, or a funeral, you just have to soldier on and get on with it. So returned to Australia, studied further, and I got an opportunity to work for the government in corrective services and work in the prison system. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is probably the worst job offer I've ever received. And I thought, you know what, there's a reason for this, and I'm going to do it because I just as well do the toughest job to upskill myself and be confident as a clinician. So I did that. And then it all really manifested into realizing that it wasn't too different to yachting. So the prisoners had their handcuffs, and we've got our golden handcuffs, and they are isolated from their loved ones. We're isolated from our loved ones, and we are limited in terms of support. Our freedom's taken away from us. So there were so many parallels between the yachting world and the prison world. And then I had reached burnout a few times in working in the prison, and I was diagnosed with vicarious trauma. And that's something to be aware of. I just did a post on Instagram story and on bullying and any comments that people have either experienced or witnessed that were harmful. And they are absolutely horrific. And with vicarious trauma, I personally wasn't witnessing some of the trauma of my clients or the prisoners, but it was all through the stories that they've told me. So, for example, one client told me how he stabbed his victim. Another client told me how he chopped his wife's hands off and things like that. And also doing intensive treatment with them. So they would be in a closed group, and we would do psychoeducation and equipping them with the skills to manage their addictions. And I think it was a very interesting prison. It was very therapeutic in nature. So once they were released, they were left to their own devices. And two of the people in my group who were actually lovely. The one guy was a street child from Indonesia and found himself in Australia, and obviously had no support growing up. And he found heroin. And he actually wrote me a beautiful poem with regards to heroin and how he described that drug and the role it played in his life. So it was the only thing available that provided him with comfort and love. He said it was like getting a big hug, having his first hit of heroin, and they chased that. Now, he was a very talented man, a graphic designer, like a beautiful graffiti work, hip hop dancer, a great singer, rap singer, and he was clean for a long time. And what they don't realize is their tolerance drops. So if you're clean and then you have a hit, the same amount that you would normally take, it could kill you instantly. So that happened to two of my clients, and I got invited to the funeral. I've met the parents of the one, being invited into the home because I'd have to do home assessments. And because I was so busy at work and doing constant crisis intervention, I was never able to process it until years later. And I had to go, I remember I was about to finish up, but I was called to the hospital because someone was picked up by border security at the hospital. And this guy was chained, his arms were chained to the bed, his feet were chained to the bed. And I'm like, this is so inhumane. Is this actually necessary? He's in isolation. There's security there watching over him. And he had swallowed, I don't know, something like 60 balloons of heroin or cocaine. And they gave him laxatives, and they wanted, obviously, for it to pass so they can charge them, and they just count how many balloons of drugs there are so that they can place a charge. And he did not want to budge because obviously he doesn't want to get charged. And it was critical because his organs could have burst. And so I got debriefed by the officer, and I was about to do the assessment. And literally, as I was about to walk in, his guts exploded. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And especially working, we have a lot of different prime ministers in and out who have different philosophies. But unfortunately, with the prison system and budgeting, that's the first resource to go. So we had all our education staff kicked out, and a lot of these guys can't read and write. And there were only a few of us clinicians. And so I championed yoga in one of the jails, and that was a big hit. It was a lot of resistance initially because they thought it was gay. They didn't want to do it. But once I convinced them of the benefits, they all gave it a go, and it continued, which was really, really good. I did meditation with them, and that was amazing. And to experience men in a group where you're defying jail culture, where you have to open up and share about your personal life, which is something they don't do, and then be vulnerable, which they see as a weakness, that was something so incredibly touching. And I realized how unfair it is for men in particular, because I think as females, it's natural for us to talk to our girlfriends about particular issues. But these guys, they don't get that opportunity because it's all that stigma associated with being weak and, hardening up. And then who do they turn to? So it just festers and marinates over time. And no wonder why we have up to 8 men kill themselves a day in Australia. And I felt it was my responsibility to make a difference. However, I couldn't at the prison because we weren't supported. And there's only so much I can do, only so many people that I can help. But when you don't have the backing, then it's really hard to achieve. And that's the same on a super yacht with a crew. If you've got two people who want to go green on board, or who are want to raise mental health awareness, and then there's, for example, the captain thinks it's a whole crock of crap, then you're kind of stuck, you're wedged, and you're basically you lose that freedom of speech and the ability to be an active agent in that change process. So yeah, my intuition, how I got into the career coach, my intuition was telling me I needed to slow down, reflect, and stop. And I'm not one to slow down. I just go, 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 go. And I was driving my scooter down to Bondi Beach, and I had an accident. And I don't know how that even happened, because I was driving only 40 kilometers an hour. And there was light rain on the road, which obviously triggered things. And the scooter fell onto my ankle and shattered it into tiny little pieces. And I thought that I was just going to have stitches and I could go to work the next day because that's what I wanted. And I spoke to the surgeon and I said, please tell me that I can go to work tomorrow. And he said, you got to be joking. He said, you will be housebound for 6 weeks and you're not going to be able to, you'll be on crutches. You have to have 2 lots of surgery. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is possibly the worst news I've ever had in my life, not to be able to go to work. That's how much my work means to me. I love it so much. So for someone that doesn't like to sit still, I thought, okay, what am I going to do with my life? I happened to reflect on the pain points in my life, and that was yachting. And I researched to find out what was happening in the industry. Was it still the same? The answer, yes, it was still the same 10 years on, which is very hard to believe. But I think things are changing. As everyone out there listening to us can see, these conversations are being held more frequently. And yeah, that's how I found myself back in the industry, because I feel like this is where I can make a difference, and this is where I want to make a difference.
Well, just to go back a little bit, I mean, you were saying that, you know, within that prison population, a lot of it was to do with addiction. Now, we do see in the yachting industry that there is a bit of an issue with addiction, a lot of alcohol addiction, from what I've seen in my years in Mallorca. Do you find there's a correlation there? That mental health because mental health has been untreated, that people tend to go towards. I mean, within yachting, maybe it's because of the bullying on board. Maybe it's because they're feeling like they aren't able to achieve what they want to achieve because they may be a certain race, or they may be a certain gender, or they may have tattoos, or because it is such almost a superficial industry at some point too. Is there a correlation there that because of mental health issues that go untreated, people tend to, you know, either they end up in jail or they end up ending their own lives?
I think absolutely yes. So it's like a Band-Aid effect. You don't have the skills and to cope with these particular feelings, whether it be anxiety or depression. You feel a bit lost with your life. You don't know what to do. Depending on your role models growing up, a lot of these prisoners, their parents were actually addicts themselves. So they go, oh, when you're angry or when you're stressed, you shoot up. So that's learned behavior. Whereas in yachting, they might have not had those antisocial role models in their life, but they are in a culture where drug taking and alcohol use is prevalent. And you just get sucked into that culture, and yeah, it takes away your worries temporarily, but then what you'll find is that you'll have a lot more issues to deal with in time.
Well, and I mean, we all know that alcohol is an actual depressant. So you may feel great while you're drinking, but the next day, whatever issues that you had the day before are actually magnified. You know, they become far worse, almost, 10 times. I know even myself, and I drink occasionally, but I'll have a couple glasses of wine and I'll think I'm on top of the world, or I've had a bad day and I'll have a couple glasses of wine to make myself feel better. And the next day, I just feel like 10 times worse than I did the day before. So it actually didn't do the job that I thought it was going to do. So it's like a cycle that you start having to repeat time and time again until it does become an issue.
And it's funny, it's like that drink, what is it? The tomato and the tequila that you have in the morning if you're hungover, the hair of the dog, and you take that and it's supposed to make you feel better. But that's part of the drinking culture, to maybe take away that guilt, and yeah, you just get back on it again. And as you said, it becomes a vicious cycle, and that's because we're not implementing other coping strategies into our daily lives to manage our stress.
So how do you think that people can start talking about, how do you think we can open up dialogue within the industry? I mean, I know that in the Mediterranean anyways, they have started to open up a lot more of a dialogue because we have had tragedies in the Mediterranean. But how can people do their part to open up dialogue and let people know that they are there and available?
I think it comes down to safety. So if people feel safe enough to open up, they will, and they will talk about it. If they feel judged for it and they fear that they might lose their jobs, then they're less likely to. So I think that will just come with time. And it's also, developing that culture of awareness and what it means to have a mental health issue, because there's a lot of judgment around that or misunderstanding around that. So, for example, it's very common that people in leadership positions within the industry or crew in general have erratic moods. And so there's a lot of ups and downs. And then people flippantly use the term, oh, she's bipolar.
Yeah.
With not understanding what it really means. So I think we just have to be very mindful of our speech and how we talk about it amongst our peer group.
So how would you recognize someone? I mean, I know that there is a lot of people out there that wouldn't speak about it. I know in my own struggles, which we've had an interview and I've been in the hot seat as opposed to you. In my own struggles, I didn't feel open enough or safe enough to talk about it. How can you recognize somebody that is in the midst of a crisis of sorts, that isn't opening up, that isn't talking about things, but obviously will need help? Is there a way, is there any sort of cue cards that you can take that these people need help?
A common one is isolating. So they might withdraw, they might not hang out in the crew mess while you guys are all sharing meals. A change in behavior, change in mood, if they short-tempered or snappy, that might be a sign. Their hygiene, if they're not taking care of themselves, that's something else that you could pick up on. Change in eating habits, sleeping habits. Obviously, you're sharing cabins, so yeah, be mindful of that. There's so many different cues that you can look out for, and as soon as you notice those cues, it's important to ask, are you okay? What's going on for you? And initially, and this is very common, people say, I'm fine, which is a way of saying, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. But don't be put off by that comment. Just keep on checking in. And then I always suggest naming the behavior, because then they kind of can't brush you off. So just say, hey, I noticed your light was on at 3 a.m. Is everything okay? Or noticed you didn't eat with us in the crew mess, or you didn't come out with us for a swim at the beach. Is everything okay? So just, noticing the behaviors, the difference in behaviors, and checking in with them.
Well, and I think we touched upon this briefly. You did actually just a little bit earlier, but it seems that men are being more affected lately. Men are sort of they're ending their lives without actually having came out and spoken about it. Now, is part of that culture just the fact that you need to man up, as it were? The expression "man up." You can't have any emotions. You can't speak. You can't cry. You can't talk. Is that part of the reason why that you see an increase in men that are suffering from depression and from mental illness?
Personally, I would say yes. I think so. It can be a combination of factors, but I think it's the stigma and those sort of maladaptive attitudes that really impact their mental health. But what we're finding more and more is there's a movement, especially here in Australia and in the sporting industry. So, for example, AFL we're finding a lot of support around those players because their careers, well, especially in the sporting arena, your careers end quite early. And it's your sense of identity so much is attached to your career that then it has a knock-on effect on your personal life, your intimate relationships, your work life, your spiritual life, your social life. It's all interconnected.
Well, and how do we go forward from here? Like, what can you suggest? Is there going to be a need, do you think, that there is, I guess, the addition of someone who is a mental health professional, or maybe the medic on board is trained also in mental health? Is that something that we can look at moving forward for the yachting industry?
Yeah. So I think definitely having a mental health first aid course where everyone's trained, and then probably delegating a mental health first aid officer. So someone who is vigilant and can take care of the crew. So yeah, I've got a mental health aid first course available. But going back to crew and administering mental health first aid, I know heads of the departments are so overloaded with the work they need to do. They've got administrative work to do. They've got to manage a team. They've got to get things done under short notice. There's so many pressures, and then to be like a therapist as well on top of that, where people seem to offload all your problems to, like, you've also got to be mindful of taking care of yourself and not taking on too much responsibility. So even maybe giving the bosun or the second stewardess that responsibility, I think would be quite effective.
Well, I would imagine that it would be, sorry?
Or even getting the crew to nominate someone, because again, going back to this feeling of safety, I don't think it should come with a title. If you think that there's someone on board that is compassionate, demonstrates self-awareness and empathy, then that would probably be the right fit for a mental health first aid officer.
Well, and to be absolutely honest, at the end of the day, if you have a healthy crew, both mentally and physically, I mean, we do tend to, we've always looked after physical needs, because we are aware that if somebody isn't physically fit or isn't physically healthy, they're unable to work. We have never had that approach towards mental illness. And the amount of productivity that is harmed, and the fact that they can't do their jobs properly, and especially in a service-orientated industry such as the super yacht industry and the yachting industry, you have to be on point 24 hours a day. There is a need and a strive for perfection. If you are having mental health issues, whether it be a title attached to it or depression, you are unable to perform to the best of your abilities. So it would just make sense, especially as an owner, taking a look at your crew, that you would want to make sure that everybody is operating to 100% of their capabilities. And we need to take a look at making sure that that is possible on board.
And that's the thing, and this is what confuses me. Like, we've got so much training around physical safety, the STC W95, all of that, but then why is there no investment in psychological safety? Because it's just as important. Like, people are ending their lives.
Yeah.
Like, that's a huge cost. And it's not only impacting one person who's ending their life, it's impacting the community and their immediate loved ones.
Well, and it's impacting, I mean, in Mallorca, it's impacted strongly, and all of a sudden people started waking up and addressing the issue. And it's such a shame that it took lives lost in order for the industry to wake up and start addressing it. Now, going forward from here, I mean, the yachting community it's not just on the yacht, it's also on shore too. There's a huge support community that works within the yachting community from the shore side. How can they go about sort of lending a hand in the issues that we are seeing today?
Well, what I've seen in Mallorca are some amazing people coming together to help each other. And I think just by vocalizing that you are available to talk to is making a difference, and having activities like wellness retreats and checking in with your neighbor. I think that is so, so important, and just connecting with people. At the end of the day, it's all about building your positive support network and knowing that there is someone it's all very well saying, yes, I'm available for support, but it's actually demonstrating in your actions that you're available, because people are shy. They have got their own unhelpful belief system. It could be thoughts like, why would they want to listen to me? What's the point? And when someone is in a bad state of mind, those are the thoughts that are running through their head. So it's important to be active in your ability to show support.
Well, and I mean, depression comes from many different sources. Depression can be something that is a chemical imbalance in your brain. Depression can be a result of having expectations of a certain sort and those expectations being smashed. Depression can come from finding yourself in an environment in which you don't feel good and you feel alone and you're far from your family. And with Yachting, you see these, 19, 20-year-olds that all of a sudden are in the middle of another country, completely halfway around the world. And all of a sudden their dream that they thought was their dream isn't actually the reality they were sold. So there's many different causes for people to sink into depression. So I think that we all need to be aware too, that it could be financial. It could be that somebody needs a home to stay in. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's really important for us everybody to take some time and do some research. I mean, 3 a.m. Googling about your symptoms for your headache will tell you that you're going to die. But Googling in the afternoon about depression and the causes of depression, the causes of anxiety, there's a lot of helpful resources out there if you just want to do a little bit of research on your own, no?
There are great resources out there. And with regards to that, a lot of people believe, and it's true, that you can experience a mental health issue based on a particular traumatic event in your life. However, it's not exactly, it doesn't have to be a car accident or being raped. It can be bullying.
Yeah.
It can be not having anyone available to talk to and feeling socially isolated. So there's a lot of reasons why mental health can manifest. And yeah, it can be genetic, as you said, it can be family history, but it includes a plethora of other issues as well.
Well, when we talk about mental health, I think a lot of people do sort of associate that with depression. But, you did bring up bipolar. Now, a lot of people use that as you said, it's just sort of a title to attach to something. But bipolar is an issue and it is something serious. Can you explain a little bit more about what bipolar is so people don't use that term so cavalierly?
It's like experiencing periods of mania and also periods of where you're feeling really down and low. So it's you oscillate between two different moods, and there's two to three different types of bipolar. There's one that can include like a lot of your behaviors include spending a lot of money, impulse buying. It could be sleeping around. There's other behaviors that are associated with it. But bipolar, it's something that you need to manage throughout your life. So connecting with a therapist and having someone to talk to, you're learning coping skills and applying those coping skills when you experiencing depression or periods of mania. So yeah, it's a bit of like being on a roller coaster in terms of your mood being up and down, but it doesn't mean that you're unable to be fit to work or contribute like a normal person in society. You can do all those things, but it's just about managing your mental health, I think, which is really, really important.
And if any of these conditions are left untreated, it can lead to crime, to death, to, many different things. And I think sometimes even the person themselves aren't capable of recognizing that they do have a mental illness.
That's right. And I don't know if that's to do with a lack of education, because like in school, we didn't get any education around mental health and what that actually means. I learned most of it through my degrees. So for the average person, how do they acquire that knowledge around different mental health conditions? that's the thing. Like, I think that's something that we need to be very aware of.
Well, exactly, because, you know, it's not something that's, once again, it goes back to the fact that it's not something anybody talks about. So, you know, we might have any number of mental health issues, but because nobody speaks about it, we would never actually think that the reason we're feeling so anxious or the reason we're feeling so sad or various other things, we wouldn't attribute that to mental illness. We would just think we're maybe awful people and sort of perpetuate ourselves even worse. So it's, you know, it's something that we need to open up more of a dialogue. You know, why is it just now in society that we are now talking about it? I wonder, why is it in the year almost 2020 that we are actually opening up a dialogue about mental health?
I think it can be a few reasons. Before, it's still, again, it's a stigma attached to mental health, and if you were seen as crazy, you were sent to a mental institution. So there was a lot of fear of acknowledging that you have a mental health issue. But now what we're doing is normalizing it through talking about it. And through talking about it, basically, you are being exposed to many more people who are experiencing mental health issues. So you don't feel alone. So people are connecting more, and we're speaking about it. So that's why we're hearing more about it.
Perfect. Well, so what do you offer now then? So for those of you out there that are listening or watching this, if they feel like they have something going on in their lives, how can you help them?
So I'm a qualified counsellor, so I offer counselling sessions for crew. And another thing is that we're very active on our Instagram page, and there's a beautiful community on the Crew Coach Instagram page. And I feel like we're all very understanding about each other. There's no judgment. And if you look at the latest stories I mentioned before, these people I ask a lot of questions and I share them, but people are being more vocal of what's going on for them. And I think that's so, so important, because then we are able to support each other and create a safe place to have these sort of discussions. So yeah, building on your social network.
Well, from what I'd like to do is be able to offer all of that information after we go off air, in case anybody does feel like they have been struggling with anything anywhere in the world. If they've got some issues and they want to reach out and they want to get some help, because I think, you know, moving forward, the more people that are saying, hey, it's okay, we're open, we're here, we'll talk, we can help. I think maybe we have a chance to end the type of tragedies that we've been seeing happening more and more lately. Thank you, Karine, very much for your time. And it's been an absolute revelation for me, and I'm sure for many other people as well. One thing I have to say is that you have such a calm and, serene presence about you that makes people very comfortable. And I would encourage those out there, if there is an issue, not only on your boat, but just in your personal life, aside from the yacht, to reach out to Karine, and I'm sure that she'll be able to help you. We're going to provide all the links. And what is coming up on the show? You're going to be doing a weekly show here on Yachting International Radio. I'm really excited about that.
Very exciting. And what I want to do is provide you guys with the tools to manage your own mental health. So I'll speak about different modalities and techniques and give information on different mental health issues and how you can best manage them, and not only for yourself, but to support your community and your loved ones too. So I think that's really, really important. And even what I've experienced and what's so beautiful is that there are crew out there that do care, and a lot of them that can identify signs of mental health issues have reached out to me and send a DM saying, look, this is what's happening with one of our crew members. I'm worried. What do you think I should do? And I will always respond as soon as I can. So feel free to reach out. And if there's any topics you'd like me to talk about, speak to either Rio or myself, and I can make that happen for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I know it's mid-afternoon for you, and it's time to let you go. But I'm really looking forward to the series coming up, and it will be ongoing weekly right here on Yachting International Radio. We'll provide all the links in order to get a hold of Karen at the Crew Coach. And of course, you have a great social media presence straight across the board. So people, all you have to know is the Crew Coach, and I'm sure you can source down exactly where you need to find whatever your favorite social media network is. But so thank you, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks very much, Ria. Take care.
You too. This is Ria for Yachting International Radio, and this has been Mental Health, the first one with Karen Rayson of the Crew Coach. We'll see you next time.